Sarah watched her 7-year-old daughter Emma stand at the back of the food line, tears streaming down her face, while her cousins filled their plates with burgers and hot dogs. Her mother-in-law had just said 5 words that shattered everything: let the real children eat first. But Sarah's husband Tom had installed security cameras in his parents' house 3 weeks ago. What those cameras captured wasn't just about a BBQ. It was years of calculated cruelty, and the footage was about to destroy his entire family. Sarah Mitchell never imagined that a 4th of July barbecue would be the day she finally understood why her children always came home from Grandma's house quieter, sadder, somehow smaller. At 34, she had spent 8 years married to Tom Mitchell, trying to fit into his suburban Atlanta family, trying to ignore the subtle signs that something was wrong. She was biracial, her mother black and her father white, and while Tom's family had never said anything overtly racist, there were always microaggressions, always comments that felt like paper cuts. But she had convinced herself it was in her head, that she was being oversensitive, until today, when she watched her mother-in-law, Patricia Mitchell, physically move her children to the back of the food line at the family barbecue. If you've ever felt like your children weren't treated fairly by family, if you've ever questioned whether you were imagining discrimination or if it was real, you need to subscribe right now, because what this husband does with security footage will vindicate every parent who ever felt their child was being treated as less than. Hit that subscribe button, because this story will give you chills and maybe even bring tears to your eyes. The Mitchell family 4th of July barbecue was a tradition that went back 30 years. Tom's parents, Patricia and George Mitchell, hosted it at their sprawling property in Marietta, complete with a pool, extensive backyard, and enough space for the entire extended family. This year, there were about 40 people: grandparents, Tom's sister Kelly, and her husband Brad with their 3 children, various aunts and uncles and cousins. Sarah and Tom arrived with their 3 kids: Emma, 7 years old with her mother's curly hair and warm brown skin; Lucas, 5, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's complexion; and baby Sophia, just 18 months old, toddling around in a red, white, and blue dress that Sarah had spent an hour getting perfect. The day started normally enough. The kids ran around playing. The adults chatted and drank beer. George manned the grill with the serious dedication of a man who took his barbecue very seriously. But Sarah noticed small things she'd been noticing for years but always dismissed. When Kelly's children, all blonde and pale like their parents, wanted to swim, Patricia immediately got them floaties and sunscreen and helped them into the pool. When Emma asked if she could swim too, Patricia said, "Maybe later, sweetie," and never followed up. When Lucas fell and scraped his knee, crying, Patricia barely glanced over before returning to her conversation. But when Kelly's youngest 4-year-old Mason tripped over absolutely nothing and whimpered, Patricia was there instantly, scooping him up, cooing over him, making a huge production of getting a Band-Aid and a popsicle. Sarah watched these interactions with growing discomfort. Tom was across the yard, talking to his father about something work-related, oblivious. Sarah wanted to say something, wanted to call it out, but what would she say? "Your mother pays more attention to Kelly's kids than ours?" It sounded petty. It sounded like jealousy. But it didn't feel petty when she watched Emma's face fall as she was ignored, when she saw Lucas try 3 times to show his grandmother a cool rock he'd found, and get dismissed each time. When lunch was ready, George called everyone over. He'd made his famous burgers, hot dogs, ribs, all the traditional 4th of July fare. The serving table was laden with food, and there was clearly enough for everyone. Patricia started organizing people into a line. "Okay, children first," she announced cheerfully. "Let's get our little ones fed before they get cranky." Sarah helped Sophia toddle toward the food table, with Emma and Lucas following eagerly. They'd been playing hard and were hungry. But as they approached, Patricia stepped in front of them, physically blocking their path with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, honey, why don't you let the other children go first?" she said, her voice sugary sweet, but with an edge like broken glass. "Let Kelly's kids get their food. Yours can wait." Sarah froze, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" Patricia's smile tightened. "Kelly's children are younger. They need to eat first. Mason gets very fussy when he's hungry. Your kids can wait a few minutes, can't they? They're older. They understand patience." Emma was 7. Lucas was 5. Kelly's oldest child was 8. The logic made no sense, and Patricia knew it. This wasn't about age or hunger. Sarah felt her face burning. Around them, other family members were pointedly looking away, pretending they hadn't heard, complicit in their silence. "Patricia, my children are hungry too," Sarah said, keeping her voice level though her hands were shaking. "They've been playing all morning. They can eat at the same time as their cousins." "Sarah, don't make a scene," Patricia said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Just let the real children eat first. Yours will get their turn. The real children. The words hung in the air like poison. Sarah felt like she'd been slapped. Emma, standing right there, had heard it. Sarah watched her daughter's face crumple, watched her understand in real time that her own grandmother didn't consider her a real grandchild. Lucas looked confused, glancing between his mother and grandmother, sensing something was wrong but not understanding what. Tom appeared then, finally noticing the commotion. Mom, what's going on? Patricia's smile returned, bright and fake. Nothing, honey. Just organizing the food line. Sarah and I were just discussing letting the younger children eat first. She said it like it was completely reasonable, like she hadn't just called Sarah's children less real than Kelly's. Tom looked between his mother and his wife, and Sarah saw the moment he chose to avoid conflict. Babe, it's fine, he said quietly to Sarah. Let's just let them go first. It's not a big deal. But it was a big deal. It was a huge deal. Sarah wanted to scream, wanted to grab her children and leave, wanted to make Tom understand that this wasn't about food or lines. It was about his mother, openly dehumanizing their children in front of the entire family. Instead, she felt tears burning in her eyes as she gently moved Emma and Lucas to the back of the line, watching Kelly's children pile their plates high while hers waited, humiliated and confused. Emma was crying silently, trying to hide it. Lucas kept asking, Mommy, why can't we eat? I'm hungry. Baby Sophia, sensing the tension, started to fuss in Sarah's arms. The entire family watched this happen and said nothing. Not one person spoke up. Not one person questioned why 3 children were being made to wait because they weren't real enough. Sarah stood at the back of that line, holding her baby and watching her older children fight tears, and something inside her broke. Not with sadness, but with cold, clear rage. This ended today. One way or another, this ended today. Later that evening, after they'd returned home and put the exhausted children to bed, Sarah confronted Tom in their kitchen. Your mother called our children not real today, she said, her voice shaking. In front of everyone, she made them wait to eat because they're not real children like Kelly's kids, and you did nothing. Tom looked exhausted, defensive. She didn't mean it like that. You're reading into things. Tom, she literally said, let the real children eat first. What other way is there to interpret that? She was talking about Kelly's kids being younger, more impatient. You're making this about race, when it's not. Sarah felt her fury crystallize into something cold and sharp. This is absolutely about race. Your children are biracial, and your family has never fully accepted them. I've been ignoring it for years, making excuses, but I'm done. Emma heard what your mother said. She knows her grandmother doesn't think she's real. Do you understand what that does to a child? Tom ran his hands through his hair, looking trapped. What do you want me to do, Sarah? Cut off my family? Never see them again? They're not perfect, but they're family. I want you to protect our children, Sarah said. I want you to stand up to your mother when she treats them like they're less than. I want you to see what's happening instead of pretending everything's fine. They argued for another hour, getting nowhere. Tom defended his family, minimized the incidents, accused Sarah of being oversensitive. Sarah felt herself hitting a wall she'd hit before, the wall of Tom choosing family peace over his children's dignity. Finally, exhausted and furious, she went to bed without resolution. She lay awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling, making a decision. If Tom wouldn't protect their children, she would, whatever it took. What Sarah didn't know was that Tom had been lying to her, not about defending his family, but about what he'd been doing for the past 3 weeks. Tom Mitchell was a cybersecurity specialist, and he'd installed cameras. Have you ever caught family treating your kids differently? Drop protect in the comments if you think children deserve better, and make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next will absolutely shock you. 3 weeks before the 4th of July barbecue, Tom had done something he'd never told Sarah about. He'd installed hidden security cameras throughout his parents' house. Not because he suspected them of anything illegal, but because he'd started to notice things Sarah had been complaining about for years, the subtle favoritism toward Kelly's children, the way his mother's face would light up when Kelly arrived, but remained polite and distant when Sarah and the kids showed up. The comments that seemed innocent on the surface but carried undertones, Tom was finally starting to hear. He told himself he was being paranoid, that Sarah was imagining discrimination that wasn't there. But doubt had started creeping in, especially after Emma came home from a weekend at Grandma's house and asked, Mommy, why doesn't Grandma love us like she loves Mason and Chloe and Zoe? That question had haunted Tom, so he'd used a security consultation at his parents' house as cover to install cameras, small, high-quality devices hidden in smoke detectors, picture frames, and decorative items throughout the common areas, audio and video. He told himself he was doing it to prove Sarah wrong, to show that his family was fine, and she was overreacting. He had no idea what he was about to discover. The night after the disastrous barbecue, while Sarah slept fitfully beside him, Tom went to his home office and started reviewing footage. He'd been collecting it for 3 weeks, gigabytes of video stored on encrypted drives. He started with the barbecue, watching the events of the day play out on screen. Seeing it from a third-person perspective, seeing his mother physically block his children from the food line, hearing her say, "Let the real children eat first," in clear digital audio, Tom felt sick. There was no misunderstanding. There was no alternate interpretation. His mother had deliberately humiliated his children, and he had minimized it, had defended her, had made Sarah feel like she was crazy. The shame was crushing, but it got worse. Tom went back through earlier footage, days and weeks of recordings. He watched interactions he hadn't been present for, conversations that happened when he wasn't in the room, and what he found shattered everything he thought he knew about his family. In footage from 2 weeks before the barbecue, he watched his mother and sister sitting in the kitchen, drinking wine, talking. Kelly was complaining about something, and Patricia was agreeing sympathetically. Then Kelly said, "I just wish Tom had married someone more appropriate, someone who fit in better." Patricia nodded. "I know, honey. I tried to warn him, but he wouldn't listen. And now we're stuck with those children." Tom paused the video, his hand shaking on the mouse. Those children, not his children. Not our grandchildren, those children. He forced himself to press play. Kelly continued, "Mason asked me why Emma and Lucas have different skin than we do. I didn't know what to say. It's awkward." "It is awkward," Patricia agreed. "And they're so... I don't know. They're just not as smart or well-behaved as your kids. Emma is always so needy, always wanting attention. Lucas never listens. I try to be patient, but honestly, Kelly, they exhaust me." Tom listened to his mother describe his children, his brilliant, funny, loving children, as needy and disobedient and exhausting. He thought about Emma, his sweet Emma who loved reading and drew pictures for everyone, who tried so hard to please her grandmother and never seemed to succeed. He thought about Lucas, who was shy but warm once he felt safe, who loved dinosaurs and building blocks, and who worshipped his older sister. They were good kids, great kids, and his mother had just written them off as inferior to Kelly's children. The video continued. Kelly lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Have you updated the will like we discussed? Making sure the house goes to my kids?" Patricia nodded. "George and I met with the lawyer last week. Everything's been adjusted. The bulk of the estate will go to your children. Tom's kids will get a token amount, just enough that he can't claim we cut them out completely, but nothing substantial. We're framing it as the house staying in the family, keeping it with children who will appreciate our legacy." Tom felt his world tilting. His parents were cutting his children out of their inheritance, not for any rational reason, but because they weren't the right kind of grandchildren, because they were biracial, because they didn't fit his family's white suburban country club image. He kept watching, kept finding more evidence. A conversation where his father, George, said, "I'm not racist, but I just think Tom's kids will have a harder time in life. Mixed kids always do. Why would we invest equally in them when Kelly's children have better prospects?" A video of Patricia literally hiding Christmas presents, meant for Kelly's kids before Sarah and the kids arrived, then bringing them out after they left. She was giving Kelly's children expensive toys and clothes while giving Emma and Lucas cheap dollar store items, deliberately ensuring the disparity. A recording of his mother on the phone with her sister, Tom's Aunt Margaret, saying, "I love Tom, but I'm disappointed in his choice. Those children will never really be Mitchell's. They're Sarah's children, not ours." Hours of footage, weeks of evidence. Tom sat in his office as dawn broke, staring at his computer screen, watching his family reveal themselves as people he didn't know. People he didn't want to know. People who had been systematically excluding and demeaning his children while he'd been defending them, while he'd been telling Sarah she was imagining things. He thought about every time Sarah had come to him with concerns, and he'd dismissed her. Every time she'd said the kids were being treated differently, and he'd accused her of being oversensitive. Every time his children had seemed sad after visiting Grandma, and he'd told them they were fine. They just needed to try harder to connect. He'd gaslit his own wife and children to protect his illusion of a happy family. And that illusion was built on lies and discrimination he'd refused to see. Tom made a decision. His mother wanted to play games with security footage? Fine. Two could play that game. Over the next week, Tom edited together a comprehensive compilation. He pulled the worst moments, the most damning conversations, the clearest evidence of favoritism and discrimination. He created a 40-minute video presentation with chapters, comments about the children, financial discrimination, inheritance planning, holiday gift disparities. It was methodical, thorough, and devastating. He showed it to Sarah on a Saturday morning after the kids were at a playdate. She watched in silence, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but vindication mixed with grief. "I wasn't crazy," she whispered when it ended. "All these years I wasn't imagining it." "No," Tom said, his voice rough with emotion. "You weren't. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I'm so sorry I let them hurt our kids. I'm sorry I wasn't the husband and father I should have been." They held each other and cried, grieving for the family Tom had thought he had, grieving for the years their children had been made to feel less than, grieving for the innocence that could never be recovered. Then they talked about what came next. Sarah wanted to cut all contact immediately, to never speak to Tom's family again. Tom agreed, but proposed something else first. "I want to show them," he said. "I want them to know we know. I want them to see themselves, to hear their own words, to understand exactly what they did. And I want to do it in front of everyone." Sarah looked at her husband and saw someone she'd been waiting years to see. A man who would fight for his children, who would burn bridges if that's what protection required, who finally understood what she'd been trying to tell him. "Okay," she said. "Let's burn it all down. The confrontation is coming, and it's going to be explosive. This family has no idea what's about to hit them. Stay tuned, because what happens next will give you chills. Make sure you're subscribed because you absolutely cannot miss this ending." Tom called his mother the following Monday with a proposal. "Sarah and I want to host a family dinner," he said, keeping his voice casual. "An apology dinner, actually. Sarah feels bad about the tension at the 4th of July BBQ. She wants to smooth things over, make amends. Can you and Dad come? And Kelly's family too? We'd really like everyone there." Patricia sounded pleased, almost smug. "Of course, honey. I'm so glad Sarah is being reasonable about this. She can be so sensitive sometimes, you know. It'll be good to clear the air." Tom felt rage burning in his chest, but kept his voice steady. "Great. This Saturday at 7, we'll provide everything." He made similar calls to Kelly, to key aunts and uncles, to his father. Everyone agreed to come, pleased that Tom was getting Sarah under control, and that the family could return to normal. They had no idea what normal was about to become. Saturday evening arrived. Sarah and Tom had spent the week preparing, not food, but their presentation. Tom set up his large screen TV in the dining room, connected to his laptop with the edited footage. Sarah prepared simple appetizers and drinks, just enough to seem hospitable. The dining room lights were on dimmers, ready to be lowered for viewing. Their children were having a sleepover at Sarah's parents' house, protected from what was about to happen. The family started arriving at 7. Patricia and George came first. Patricia carrying a store-bought pie and wearing a smile that said she'd won. Kelly and Brad arrived with their kids, who were immediately loud and demanding, asking for snacks and entertainment. Tom's Aunt Margaret came, and his Uncle Steve, and a few cousins. About 20 people total, a significant portion of the Mitchell family. They gathered in the living room, chatting, drinking wine, expecting a normal family dinner, followed by apologies from Sarah. At 7:30, Tom called everyone into the dining room. "Before we eat, Sarah and I want to share something with everyone," he said. "We've been doing some reflecting about family dynamics, and we put together a little presentation. It'll only take about 40 minutes. "A presentation?" Kelly laughed. "Tom, what is this, a business meeting?" "In a way," Tom said. "Please, everyone sit down. This is important." The family settled around the dining table and in chairs brought in from other rooms. Patricia looked slightly annoyed at the delay in dinner, but she was still riding high on her perceived victory, so she smiled indulgently. "All right, honey. Show us your presentation." Tom dimmed the lights and started the video. The screen lit up with the title, "The Truth About Family," a documentation. For the first 30 seconds, nobody reacted. Then the first audio clip played, Patricia's voice clear as crystal. "I tried to warn him, but he wouldn't listen. And now we're stuck with those children." The room went silent, except for the voices on the screen. Tom watched his family's faces as they recognized themselves, as they heard their own words played back. Patricia's face went from confused to pale to horrified. Kelly's mouth dropped open. George looked like he'd been punched. The video continued relentlessly. Every comment, every conspiracy, every act of discrimination documented and displayed in high definition with crystal clear audio. The conversation about changing the will. The discussion about hiding Christmas presents. Patricia calling Emma needy and Lucas disobedient. Kelly saying Sarah wasn't appropriate for Tom. George discussing his grandchildren's prospects based on their race. Aunt Margaret agreeing that mixed kids would never really be Mitchells. The 4th of July barbecue footage, showing Patricia physically blocking the children, saying, "Let the real children eat first," with Emma's devastated face right there in frame. 40 minutes of evidence. 40 minutes of the Mitchell family revealing themselves as people who discriminated against children, who favored some grandchildren over others based on skin color, who conspired to exclude and marginalize innocents who had done nothing wrong except be born. When the video ended, Tom turned the lights back up. The silence was suffocating. Then Patricia found her voice, shrill and defensive. "Tom, how dare you? You recorded us? That's illegal. That's a violation of privacy." "Actually, Mom, it's perfectly legal," Tom said calmly. "Georgia is a one-party consent state for recording. I'm one party. I consented. And even if it wasn't legal, I don't care. Everyone needed to see this. Everyone needed to know what you really think, what you really do when you think nobody's watching." "This is out of context," Kelly protested, her face red. "You're twisting things, making us look bad." "I didn't twist anything," Tom replied. "These are your exact words, your exact actions. The only thing I did was compile them so everyone could see the pattern, could understand that this isn't isolated incidents or misunderstandings. This is systematic, deliberate discrimination against my children." Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice steady, despite the tears on her face. "Emma is 7 years old. She knows her grandmother doesn't love her. She's internalized the message that she's not good enough, not real enough, not white enough to be a full member of this family. Lucas is 5, and he asks me why Grandma is nicer to his cousins than to him. He thinks it's his fault, thinks he's not trying hard enough to be good. You did that. All of you who watched it happen and said nothing, who participated in it, who enabled it. You taught my children that they're less than, and I will never forgive you for that." Patricia tried tears, the weapon she'd always used to manipulate situations. "I never meant to hurt them. I love all my grandchildren equally." "That's a lie," Tom said flatly, "and we have 40 minutes of evidence proving it's a lie. You changed your will to exclude my children. You give Kelly's kids expensive gifts while giving mine dollar store junk. You call them those children and Sarah's kids instead of acknowledging them as Mitchells. You literally said they'll never really be Mitchells. So no, Mom, you don't love them equally. You don't love them at all." George tried the authority approach, his voice booming. Tom, this is enough. You're tearing this family apart over nothing. Over nothing? Tom's voice rose for the first time, cracking with emotion. My children being discriminated against is nothing? Your grandchildren being emotionally abused is nothing? What would be something, Dad? Would it be something if someone did this to you? If someone made you feel unwelcome and inferior in your own family? They're just being sensitive, Aunt Margaret interjected. Children are resilient. They'll get over it. Get over being told they're not real? Sarah's voice was ice. Get over years of being treated as less than. Would you get over it, Margaret? Would you tell your children to just get over systematic rejection from people who are supposed to love them unconditionally? The room erupted in arguments, accusations, defensiveness. Everyone trying to justify their behavior, minimize their participation, deflect blame. Tom let it go on for a few minutes, then stood up and shouted, "Enough!" The room fell silent again. Tom took a breath, steadying himself. Here's what's going to happen now. Sarah, the kids, and I are done with this family. We're not coming to holidays. We're not doing visits. We're not taking phone calls. You will have no relationship with my children going forward. None. You can't do that, Patricia cried. We're family. You should have thought about that before you treated my children like they weren't family, Tom said. You made choices. Now you get to live with consequences. Kelly stood up furious. You're punishing us for being honest? For having private conversations? Everyone has preferences, Tom. Everyone has favorite grandchildren. You're being ridiculous. If you think having favorites means actively excluding children, denying them inheritance and calling them not real, then yes, I'm punishing you for that, Tom replied, and I'm not sorry. We'll sue for grandparents' rights. Patricia threatened. We'll take you to court. Try it, Tom said coldly. I have documentation of emotional abuse, discrimination, and conspiracy to defraud my children of inheritance. I have evidence that you're psychologically harmful to minors. No judge will give you access. But please, take us to court. I'd love to make this video public record. Patricia's face crumbled. She knew she'd lost, knew that any legal action would expose her behavior to scrutiny she couldn't survive. George put his hand on his wife's shoulder, looking defeated and old. Tom, please, he said quietly. Don't do this. They're your family. No, Tom said. Sarah and our children are my family. You're just people I used to know who hurt the people I love. There's a difference. I choose my family, and I don't choose you. He gestured to the door. Dinner's over. Everyone needs to leave. Now. The family filed out slowly, some crying, some angry, some just shocked. Kelly tried to approach Tom, to plead or argue, but he turned away from her. Just go, Kelly. We're done. Patricia was the last to leave, pausing at the door to make one final attempt. Tom, you're making a mistake. You're going to regret this. Those children need their family. Those children, Tom said, the words heavy with disgust, have names. Emma, Lucas, and Sophia. And they need family who loves them, who treats them equally, who doesn't make them feel like they're less than. That's not you. That's never been you. Goodbye, Mom. He closed the door in her face and locked it. Through the window, he watched his family walk to their cars, watched his mother sobbing on his father's shoulder, watched Kelly gesturing angrily. He felt no guilt, only a strange sense of lightness, like a weight he'd carried for years had finally been lifted. Sarah came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. How do you feel? She asked. Free, Tom said. I feel free. The aftermath was swift and messy. Patricia tried calling and texting, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to angry to manipulative. Tom blocked her number. Kelly sent long emails explaining how hurt she was, how Tom had misunderstood, how they could work through this. Tom blocked her email. Various family members tried to mediate, to smooth things over, to convince Tom he was overreacting. Tom sent them all the same response. I've documented everything. The discrimination against my children ends now. If you supported it or enabled it, we're done. If you stayed silent while it happened, we're done. My children's well-being is not negotiable. Some family members accepted this. A few cousins reached out to apologize, to admit they'd seen the favoritism and should have said something. Tom was civil but distant. The trust was broken. Most of the family chose Patricia's side, convinced that Tom was being cruel, that he'd weaponized technology to destroy family bonds. They couldn't or wouldn't see that the family bonds had been broken long before Tom installed cameras. He'd just documented the breaking. Sarah and Tom had long conversations with Emma and Lucas, age-appropriate explanations about why they wouldn't be seeing Grandma and Grandpa Mitchell anymore. They found a family therapist who specialized in racial identity and family trauma. Emma, in her second session, drew a picture of herself with a question mark over her head. "This is me wondering if I'm real," she explained to the therapist. The therapist looked at Sarah with such compassion that Sarah had to leave the room to compose herself. It took months, but slowly, Emma started to understand it wasn't her fault. Lucas began to relax, no longer anxious about saying the wrong thing or being good enough. Sophia, still a toddler, wouldn't remember much of this, which was a small mercy. They built new traditions. Sarah's parents, who had always loved all their grandchildren equally, became more present in the kids' lives. Tom's cousins who had apologized were allowed supervised visits, proving they could treat the children with dignity. The family Sarah and Tom built was smaller, but it was real. It was safe. 6 months after the confrontation dinner, Patricia and George tried one last manipulation. They announced to extended family that they were dying, both diagnosed with terminal cancer, and their final wish was to reconcile with Tom and meet their grandchildren one more time. It was a lie, designed to force Tom's hand through guilt and social pressure. Tom called their doctor's office, using his security clearance and a few legal maneuvers. Both parents were perfectly healthy. He sent proof of the lie to everyone who'd pressured him to reconcile. "This is who they are," he wrote in a group email. "They would rather fake terminal illness than admit wrongdoing or change their behavior. This is exactly why my children don't need them." The lie backfired spectacularly. Several family members who'd been supporting Patricia and George turned against them, appalled at the manipulation. Patricia's reputation in their community suffered when word spread. She'd overplayed her hand, and it cost her dearly. Tom felt no satisfaction, just a tired sadness for what could have been if his parents had chosen differently. A year after everything exploded, Tom sat in his backyard watching Emma play with Lucas and baby Sophia, now walking and getting into everything. Emma was laughing, really laughing, in a way she hadn't before. She'd made the honor roll at school. She was in counseling but thriving, learning that her worth wasn't determined by people who couldn't see it. Lucas had come out of his shell, confident and funny, no longer trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Sophia was happy, oblivious to the family drama she'd been spared. Sarah came out with lemonade, sitting beside Tom on their porch swing. "Any regrets?" she asked. "Only that I didn't do it sooner," Tom said. "Only that I let them hurt our kids for as long as I did." "You did the right thing when it mattered," Sarah said. "That's what counts." Tom pulled her close, watching their children play in the golden afternoon light. This was family. Not the people who shared his DNA, but the people he chose to protect, to cherish, to build a life with. The people who deserved his loyalty, his real family. So what would you do in Tom's position? Was he right to cut off his entire family? Should he have given them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you've ever had to protect your children from toxic family members, drop your story below. Let's build a community of parents who choose their kids over toxic traditions. And make sure you're subscribed because there are so many more powerful stories coming your way. hit that bell icon so you never miss an upload. Remember, you don't owe anyone a relationship who treats your children as less than. Protect your kids first, always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.